The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
I want to change the discussion to Barack Obama. How has the name of Barack Obama been entered into your legal case, Michael?
Well, I think there's been some confusion here. Parallel with this case, my prosecution was wholly opposed by the NSA, I believe, because the NSA, remember, got the satellite. As this water bath is dismantled, there's a huge spike in the radiation of this weapon. Before it gets safely under the water again, it's very vulnerable to detection, and the NSA detected it. So the NSA, from the beginning, awfully nice people, have never supported the prosecution and thought it was completely wrong. Sections of CIA also were very opposed to the prosecution. Somebody in CIA, I am told, some weeks ago, distributed to a website with not unknown to the CIA, an excerpt from a video briefing I had given to the Marlborough Research Group, a very good intelligence clearinghouse set up by a now 100-year-old intelligence officer called, this is an American program, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Beckoff, MBE, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Harry Beckoff, MBE, who was General Montgomery's intelligence liaison with Bletchley Park during the run-up to the Battle of El Alamein. Harry Beckoff was the man who took to Montgomery the decrypts of Rommel's communications with the OKH and the OKW in Berlin. He had a very important role to play.
I'm glad they didn't arrest him.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. Now, Harry chaired this meeting. I gave a briefing, which was picked up by perhaps 300 people on the Internet. All of a sudden, it goes to an American website, and just in advance of the trial, and it goes viral, and there are suddenly 2 billion hits a day on YouTube. Now, clearly these events are connected, but there's a further connection because one of the operations that Mr. Jones and I worked on was Obama. And that's going to come up during the course of the trial because it's relevant. You see, the prosecution, Christopher won't be able to believe this, but the prosecution are following what I regard with respect as an almost insane strategy of trying to say I have no intelligence connections at all, even though they're calling a whole raft of intelligence officers who I've been speaking to on the cell phone to try and establish what's going on, because I don't just pick up the phone and talk to the Ministry of Defence. I'm speaking to intelligence officers, and all the guys I'm speaking to are heavy-duty intelligence. And one was a wet work specialist for MI5. So we've got the prosecution calling a wet work specialist for MI5 and trying to say he's got no involvement in intelligence. I mean, it's extraordinary nonsense. The prosecution have completely put on the table all of my intelligence links. And there are several hundred. They seized my diaries and address books. There are several hundred names and numbers in there. Now, I'm not going to blow those names and numbers in open court, but the jury will see them as they go through the prosecution exhibits. And one of the things I had been working on was the Obama case, and that is going to come out during the trial. But it's not going to feature in a major way, but it is undoubtedly going to feature. And the open-ended way in which the prosecution is being conducted has allowed me, as the defense, to put in issue any of my intelligence successes. And the conclusion, the determination that Obama was born in Mombasa in 1960 was a pretty significant intelligence success. And I think Christopher and I have the same view on this, do we not, Christopher?
Well, I mean, I don't know where he was born. All I do know is that the document on the White House website is virtually certain to be a forgery. Well, I was actually called in by a firm of lawyers in Hawaii a couple of years ago to go over there, speak to some people, go to see the sheriff in Arizona, speak to him who's been investigating all this, and then to do a mathematical report on the probability that this document could be genuine, given the various irregularities with it that have been found by the trained investigating officers of the police whose job it is to investigate these things. I met them, I talked to them at some length. I saw those parts of the evidence that they were able to show me because they were already public, and we discussed how they'd got this intelligence and what they made of it and why they thought what they thought. I did the mathematical report, put it in an affidavit, and swore it down the road here with my Edinburgh solicitors to send it off to them. And the solicitors read it and they said, well, this is the most interesting affidavit we've ever seen. What's going to happen now? And I said, I tell you that for certain. I said, nothing will happen. Once you get beyond a certain level, you become untouchable. A huge crime has been committed here, probably against the American people, and nobody will lift a finger to do anything about it.
Well, that may be true, although I have to say, Krista, that there has now been, and Rick may be interested in this, there is now quite a serious legal strategy on the table. I'm giving evidence in the case in June that has been brought by a very nice man called Christopher Earl Strunk in the New York State Supreme Court, and that's being heard in June, on the June 17th, 18th. And I'm flying over to give evidence, assuming the administration don't block my entrance to the United States, which someone has threatened to do, and I didn't think that's going to get very far.
So, Michael, what do you know about Barack Obama's origins?
My firm understanding is that he was born in Mombasa, in what was then the Kenya Protectorate, or the Coastal Protectorate. Kenya is slightly complex. The modern Kenya is derived from two territories: Kenya Colony, which was part of the British Empire, and Kenya Protectorate, which wasn't. It was part of the territory of the Sultan of Zanzibar. Now, your president was born a subject, as I've set out in Spy Hunter. He was born a subject of His Highness the Sultan of Zanzibar. In my view, my analysis is that he was born on August 4th, 1960. His mother, the claimed mother, we can clearly exclude. The bit that went viral was the bit where I had told the Marlborough Research Group about my advice to the CIA and the DIA, whose director and deputy director, by the way, about to be offloaded. I'm not sure why. I advised the CIA and the DIA at a very agreeable lunch at Claridge's. I think Christopher would agree that most lunches at Claridge's tend to be agreeable, to obtain a DNA report on Obama. And the CIA had asked me, well, how do we get a DNA report on a presidential candidate? I said, it's easy. You just use wine glasses and water glasses. It's still not clear to me, because everything then went the CIA went very, very quiet, obviously, as soon as the DNA results came in. And Obama failed them, and clearly the DNA test results clearly exclude any relationship between Obama and the claimed mother.
You're saying that the CIA had a DNA test of Barack Obama?
Oh yes, It was tough off my advice. I'd done something similar. I used to chair the Immigration Appeal Tribunal. I used to be an immigration judge. We had more experience, probably, on the Immigration Appeal Tribunal with DNA reports, and it would be difficult to conceive of another judicial body having more experience of DNA. We did DNA. Remember, DNA fingerprinting was invented in Britain. I first used it in a case as long ago as 1985. So by the time I gave this advice, I had 22 years' experience of DNA fingerprinting. We used to deal with DNA reports from a company called Cellmark Diagnostics, a division of ICL, most of the time. ICI, rather. We used to deal with DNA reports day in, day out, and I was very, up to speed on DNA. I understood that you didn't need blood for DNA, that you could do it with saliva. And with a British politician, Christopher, I won't mention the name in a public radio broadcast, but an issue arose as to whether a British Labour politician was the father of a child that he was claiming to be his. There was a dispute about whether another Labour politician was in fact the father. MI5 sounded me out about it over an informal lunch. Christopher knows how these things are done. It was done at a military base. It wasn't done with serving MI5 officers for deniability. It was a very nice retired brigadier and a very nice, usual story. A very nice little lunch at a little military facility.
Michael, let me ask you, where did the CIA get the DNA sample of Barack Obama?
From a wine glass at a fundraiser. And the Secret Service, by the way, now protect the president's DNA. The Secret Service, well, you won't get anywhere near. Nobody else can. You won't be able to do a DIY DNA test on Barack Hussein Obama. I was told some weeks ago, and I have no reason to doubt it. The Secret Service now protect the president's DNA.
And that's another puzzle, because why would the Secret Service, whose job is to defend not just the person but also the office of the president, knowingly protect a man who they presumably by now know is not really the president at all?
Well, Lord Monckton, that is the question millions of Americans have been asking since 2009. This radio program has devoted endless hours of interviewing experts who could easily be brought in as an expert witness in a trial to give evidence that there is something irregular about Barack Obama's identity. And we're all puzzled because from the intelligence agencies down to Congress, the Speaker of the House, the U.S. Senate President, nobody, the Supreme Court, nobody will touch the issue. And I have said on this program many times, Barack Obama could not get a national security clearance to be a janitor in a U.S. government warehouse, let alone become the president of the United States.
Social security number doesn't pass E-Verify.
That's right. That's right. And one of our guests,
correct.
One of our guests ran his Social Security number through the E-Verify system, and it came out that it was fake. And she was arrested for running the E-Verify.
I know this is Mr. Jones got hold of that intelligence and passed it to me, and it's all part of the prosecution case. You can see how Obama is going to. How does Obama relate to a nuclear weapon, a nuclear security scare in London? Well, the answer is that the CPS have illegally trawled through all my emails, and there's one from Mr. Jones relating to that exact piece of intelligence, and that is obviously going to be the subject of cross-examination of Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones was right, and the lady who did the Social Security number check was right. The Social Security number he has put forward is not a genuine number. It's a number that belongs to someone who died many, many years ago.
It was a Connecticut man.
Connecticut, that's right.
Who moved to Hawaii, and he died at age 90.
Yes. Exactly. Now, that's not widely known, but there's going to be huge. I agree with Christopher. I think if this trial goes ahead, and obviously part of me says, oh, bring it on, please, because it's going to be such fun. If the judge is, if I may say, is a very nice judge, and it's a pleasure to be in his court. Part of me doesn't want the prosecution to drop this case. I mean, it's obviously a nuisance as a barrister to be prosecuted, but part of me doesn't want the case to be dropped because it's going to be such fun. We're going to have enormous fun with that particular email relating the details over the president's social security.
I'll tell you where I think the difficulty is going to come, though, Michael, and that is that, as I know from having dared to question climate change and having dared to question whether Obama is genuinely who he says he is, the left will attack savagely the personal reputation of anyone who raises these issues. And the left-wing media, which means nearly all of them now, will brand you and me and anybody else who takes these stances as a lunatic. And if you bolt that together with your allegation, which, on the face of it does actually seem a little bit implausible, that nuclear weapons were being sailed up and down various rivers in southeastern Britain on an old German submarine, people are going to say, has this guy taken leave of his senses? And I was talking to a very senior congressman in my club in Washington last year about this, and I said, look, why won't you do anything about the Obama situation? He said, we all know he's not who he said he was. We all know that now, he said. It's absolutely clear, but none of us dares to say anything because the left will savage the reputation of the first person to put his name.
Lord Monckton,
this is what they now do.
Lord Monckton, I had a U.S. congressman, I won't name, he told me privately, I asked the same question, and his answer was, Rick, Speaker Boehner has prohibited us from bringing up the subject.
And that's for the same reason. Because he too is terrified that supposing that it turned out that everything was in order after all, then if the Republicans had been seen to be the ones to raise it, the left would never forgive them. There'd be the most awful kind of character assassination going on.
Of course.
Now, what has really happened is a complete failure of nerve and of courage on the part of every congressman and every senator. They've all received detailed briefings from several sources, including official sources, on this matter. They've all looked the other way, and they've not looked the other way in Congress because Speaker Boehner has told them to, because he has no power to tell them to. They are much more independent-minded and much more free to do their own thing if they want than we would be in the United Kingdom, in either House of Parliament. But the fact is they've all decided to funk it because they can find reasons. The ultimate reason does come down to this business of their being absolutely terrified that the left will savage their reputation. And the Congressman put it to me, he said, look what they've done to you. They've even managed to involve the Clerk of the Parliament in the UK. They've paid him, or done whatever they may have done. They've got him to say that you're not a member of the House of Lords, which of course I am, though I have no right to sit or vote. They're doing everything they can to destroy your reputation because you have effectively demonstrated what nonsense their story on climate change.
Well, of course.
And they won't forgive you. He said now they're going to do the same to any one of us who dares to say anything about Obama's parentage. They won't forgive us ever if any of us says anything about this. So we're all going to run and take cover and accept that we've had 8 years of somebody who shouldn't have been president.
Do you gentlemen,
honest about it.
Do you gentlemen,
we don't dare.
Yes. Do you gentlemen remember that in his first year as a U.S. Senator, Senator Barack Obama was taken on a Foreign Affairs Committee trip with the former senator from Indiana, Mr. Lugar, who was very well known for disarmament, and they went to Russia, and Senator Obama was the junior senator. Mr. Lugar was the senior senator on the trip, and the Russians detained Senator Obama. This is the story that was reported. He was detained because the Russians suspected that he was an intelligence agent, and that he wasn't an intelligence agent for us, that he was working for Her Majesty's service. Do you remember that story?
No,
that does sound bizarre.
Well, the Russians are right, but the true connection, I think, is with Germany. Remember, his father worked for the Mau Mau, and they were run by the Germans. I agree with Christopher. I understand, of course, Christopher's right, that that's what the left would try to do. But I always told my intelligence students, and I have several hundred former students in various U.S. intelligence and law enforcement agencies, and I always notice an email from a former student because they address me as Professor Shrimpton, which is very polite of them. I always tell my intelligence students, never mind how the intelligence sounds or how you think it will be received. Your job in the intelligence community is to speak truth to power and to get it right. And if you're confident in your analysis, then put it forward. And if you're right, then it will all come out in the wash.
Michael, I don't know, a month or so ago, Barack Obama brought up in a speech the issue about his birth certificate.
Yes.
And when he did it, I thought, okay, this is odd that he would bring up the subject. And my first thought was, what is percolating under the surface that has him worried that his identity is at risk of being exposed? And then shortly after that is when the Jerry Corsi stories started appearing about you and your situation in Great Britain. And I was just wondering, is Mr. Obama, is he worried right now?
I think he is. He's lawyering up. The White House are probably monitoring this broadcast. I assure you. If they are high, I mean, I do know my way to the White House when that very nice man, George W. Bush, was president. And he came in for a lot of stick from the left. But he did the right thing, and God bless him. And I speak highly of George W. Bush. When George W. was president, I was, in fact, invited into the White House, although it was by Dick Cheney's people in the old executive office building. And the stuff we were talking about, I can tell you, was so sensitive. I got into the White House, having gone through security. And, Rick, you know what it's like getting through security at the White House. I mean, it's not, it takes a while to get your bag searched, and it's a process that doesn't finish in 30 seconds. And having gone through security, the man I went to see on Dick Cheney's staff said, "Hi, Michael, we're going straight out the building to the nearest Starbucks. There is no way we can have this conversation that we're about to have in this building. Too many spies." And he was right. And we ran down to the Starbucks on 7th. It's a very nice Starbucks on 17th Street near the White House. And that's where we had, out in the open, a very secure conversation. Nobody knew we were headed there. Nobody was bugging us, and we were able to have a serious conversation in which the subject of the DVD sponsorship of 9/11 may well have come up. But I think what's worrying the White House, and the reason why Obama is, to use an American expression, lawyering up, somebody's come forward, and it wasn't me. I don't take credit for stuff I haven't done. Somebody's come up with a very sensible, realistic strategy that doesn't involve going to the Supreme Court, who've thrown in the towel on this, It doesn't involve getting judges who are clearly reluctant to do the right thing, although I have to say the judge in New York sounds to me, with respect, as a very serious judicial figure indeed. But it involves the House of Representatives, which I think has the power to commission a special prosecutor or appoint a special prosecutor who would ask for the president to undergo a DNA test in the same way that the special prosecutor forced President Clinton to undergo a DNA test when issue arose as to whether certain bodily fluids of President Clinton ended up on a dress belonging to a certain lady named Monica Lewinsky. I think that's what's got the White House worried.
Michael,
the thing is that although I know that the sheriff's office in Arizona has been looking to see if it can get a DNA test agreed to, that's not the first or easiest way to do this. The first thing to do is for the sheriff simply to go to the federal district court and say, look, here's the evidence. The evidence is now overwhelming. They haven't yet got, it's fair to say, the complete knockout single piece of evidence that you could say is completely incontrovertible. But they've got so many pointers that the probability of its being a genuine document is very, very small. That's why they call me
I agree.
The probability analysis. So what they should do is go with that analysis, go with the material they've got in front of the Federal District Court, just say to the judge, please can we have orders to make Hawaii release the original documentation for forensic examination. That's what would normally happen in a straightforward criminal police inquiry.
Exactly.
And the thing that's amazing to me is that after all this time, that still hasn't been done. It's much less exciting than taking a DNA test, but it is if you wanted to justify a DNA test, you'd have to do that first.
I talked to a former U.S. federal prosecutor on this subject, and I asked him, I said, if when you were a prosecutor, if a case had been brought to you that a man had applied for a U.S. government job that required security clearance, and in the process of doing the due diligence on this person's background, there were all kinds of glaring inconsistencies. Would you just close the file and say he's not qualified, or would it spur you to open up a criminal investigation of who he is and why he was attempting to get that job? And he said, absolutely, we would open up a criminal investigation.
Yes, I agree.
And yet they haven't. And that's the thing. I can't even understand why the sheriff hasn't been able to persuade the Secretary of State in Arizona to let him go and ask the judge for the necessary orders. Indeed, I don't really understand why the whole
establishment, Michael, the whole American political establishment is either complicit in this cover-up or terrified to ask any questions. I've got just 6 minutes remaining. Is there any possibility that Edward Snowden took to Russia NSA files regarding Barack Obama?
Yes, that's my view. It's increasingly clear that Snowden, who was a Chinese spy, Snowden got access. Remember, the lunch that I had was not just with the CIA, but also with the DIA. And the DIA obviously worked closely with the NSA, who also awfully nice people. And it's perfectly clear to me that Meade got a copy of the DNA report. Now, the problem with Meade, I love Meade to bits, they're wonderful people, but they do have they do believe in computers at Fort Meade, and that won't take your listeners by surprise. And of course, Fort Meade digitized the DNA test. I don't think it went into the CIA's DNA test went into the director's safe in hard copy format, and I don't think the CIA ever opened up a computer file. The NSA opened up a computer file, I believe. I can't be certain, but I believe they opened up a computer file, and although they thought it was secure, what they weren't counting on was a Chinese spy with high-level access inside NSA to their systems. And it looks as though the DNA report went to Peking, and it was given to Peking by Snowden, which partly explains, I think, the cozying up, the talk about G2 and the cozying up between Obama and Peking. Now, when Snowden went to Hong Kong, he was initially obviously going to China. Hong Kong is effectively now part of China. And he goes to Chinese jurisdiction, I think intending to go into China. The Chinese are very nervous about being seen to be employing Snowden. The Chinese didn't want to admit Snowden onto Chinese territory proper. Snowden then opens up negotiations, on my information, in Hong Kong with the Russians and he agrees to take to Russia a copy of the DNA test. And I believe Snowden has had a one-to-one meeting with that very nice man, Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir has got a copy of the DNA report, which is...
Now, the thing is, can we stop again a moment, Mike? You see, listening to all this, an ordinary guy in the outside world who hasn't heard any of this before is going to say that virtually every word you're saying indicates that you're bonkers. How are you going to deal with that when the prosecution tries that on?
Well, they've already tried. They've already tried it. They fell flat on their face. Of course, they're going to try that. It's a standard intelligence tactic. It was tried during the Stalin era by NKVD and Beria. So you don't agree with what somebody's saying, so you say that they're obviously insane. The CPS tried to get a psychiatric report commissioned in 2013, and the whole thing fell flat on their face. I retaliated by turning around and taking an IQ test and joining Mensa. And so I think it's very difficult. I mean, it's possible to be insane and a member of Mensa, but it's not easy. But I then made a determined effort to find out what was being said about my IQ by various intelligence agencies.
Well, one thing that we know, gentlemen, is that the one subject that certain people do not want discussed is the identity of Barack Obama.
Correct.
And I'm really puzzled by this because, I mean, if I were any sort of a red-blooded journalist in the United States, on whichever side of the fence, I would want to get to the bottom of this.
Yes, exactly. Any good journalist would.
Because journalists don't have to be quite so worried about their reputations. If a journalist gets a scoop and he finds out all that, say, I now know about that birth certificate and why it's virtually bound to be bogus, then that's a story. It's a very big story. It's a very interesting story. It's a fascinating story, how the forensic work was done, how they found out what's wrong with it, both electronically and in the typefaces, all sorts of things, the numbers and the social security. It's a huge story, which you could do in a series of articles or TV programs. Nothing has been done.
Of course not. Well,
Michael, we've got 1 minute. I'll let you have the closing remark in the next 60 seconds.
There's a famous old English saying, well known in the United States, he who laughs last laughs loudest. Professor, in inverted commas, Shrimpton, as I am in the United States, Professor Shrimpton is doing what he always told his students to do. Tell the truth, call it as it is, and don't worry too much about what people will say about you. If that is your analysis, then you go with it. I am prepared to take reputational risks. I have taken them. I think you have to. We can't, the truth is important. It's absolutely essential. The truth will not come out unless people are prepared to stick their necks out. Christopher's right. I have stuck my neck out. Well, so be it. That's what you have to do in the intelligence community. The nicest thing anybody ever said about me was to compare me with that wonderful man, Douglas Bader. And that came from a personal friend of Douglas Bader. I thought it was the nicest thing anybody ever said about me. When you're in a battle, you line the other side up, and you close in on them, you open the throttle fully wide open, you put the supercharger up into full speed, you press the tit, and you fire away. You blaze away.
Well, Michael, we will be following very closely what happens in your case in Great Britain. And I want to thank Mr. Michael Shrimpton and Lord Christopher Monckton for being our guest today. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We appreciate you being on True News today.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.